my friends. It's been quite some time since I've done a live stream. Just been really busy and stuff. I think everybody can relate to that. My videos have been kind of slowing down, especially my reviews. And, you know, honestly, I'm kind of review burnt out. And so it's why I've been kind of doing some other things on the channel. And as we all might know, the knife world, especially, is going to be really slowing down. Um, Obviously, there's a lot of factors in that. Steel is getting harder to get. A lot of our good knife steels are European imports, and so tariffs and some of the European companies are going under, and so some of those great steels like ADCR V2, Nitro V, I suspect eventually even AEBL and a lot of your great just knife steels are kind of going by the wayside, and so sadly, uh, I think that a lot of your small makers and even bigger companies probably will be going under. And it's not necessarily any fault of their own, but I think there's a lot of oversaturation in the knife world. And I also think that, quite frankly, the economy is just hitting everybody a lot harder and harder and harder. And so people just don't got the disposable income. How's it going, Super Saiyan Bear? Hey, I've been meaning to ask you, do you happen to follow Beartaria? I'm just kind of curious because I know I kind of have dabbled into the Beartaria side of things. And if you know what I'm talking about, then you'll know. But if not, then I'm just wondering. I know a lot of people on Beartaria will give themselves uh, bear names. So I was just wondering if I stumbled into you on the whole Beartaria thing or not. Maybe you don't have any idea what I'm talking about. But yeah, it's nice to have you on a live. I've Okay, so you met me into camp. Okay. Sorry, I probably would remember you if I seen you. I just can't honestly remember everybody. And I've been wanting to go to another Barataria thing, but having two little guys and them always doing it on Labor Day when it's still like 100 degrees out. I kind of wish they pushed it back into like late September or October or something when it cools off a bit. I think the Beartaria event would be a lot nicer if they did that. I understand why they do it on Labor Day, but I think, and maybe I'm wrong there. I'd like to know your opinion on that. I think it'd be cooler if they, literally cooler if they pushed it back a month or two. But that's just me though. I personally would rather camp when it's 60, 70 degrees than when it's 100 degrees. But yeah, so if I'm seeing you in person or seeing a picture of you, I'd probably remember you. I knew I recognized the name. I just couldn't quite remember if I met you on Beartaria or not. Guys, Beartaria is a kind of a cool thing. I don't know if people's as active on it as they used to be. I know I'm still on the app, but I haven't really posted much on there. Oh, the bear community, and okay, all right. Yeah, the Beartaria app is actually pretty cool. I haven't been on there as much. I kind of probably need to get on there more. Um, but yeah, the Beartaria campout thing was actually really cool too. It just kind of, and it's in my home state here. Hey, how's it going, Brett? We got Brett, we got Super Saiyan Bear. We might not have a lot of people here, but you know what? That's all cool. I was just kind of talking about how the economy is like really affecting the knife world, and I actually think a lot of knife makers and knife companies are probably going to go by the wayside for numerous reasons. And really, honestly, the lack of steel, the cost of materials, and the economy mostly is probably going to go by the wayside. I mean, I'll describe myself. I am completely debt free. I don't have any debt, but I'm also living on one income. I work and provide for my family and everything. And I'll be totally honest, I can't hardly buy knives like I used to. I can't hardly buy anything like I used to. And I'm completely debt free. So I could only imagine people that are paying rent and are paying a mortgage and everything, and paying just ridiculous amount of monies to get by, and still, yeah, I mean, I feel like I go paycheck to paycheck being debt free. So the economy is not doing great at all. But that's kind of what was going to lead me into the more important topic of the conversation here. And so I did a video a few days ago, maybe last week, of Is America Babylon? And actually, guys, give me 1 second here. Okay, I think my camera was just my camera was a little smudgy, so I didn't want you guys to deal with that. But I did a video on how I think the United States could be Babylon. And what I mean by that is not only spiritually, but also physically. And I think we're seeing that manifest. And, people's constantly like, oh, why don't they do this to fix America? Why don't they do that to fix America? Blah, blah, blah. And when you really think about it, a lot of the problems that's affecting the United States is really simple, stupid problems with really simple, stupid solutions. And so at a certain point, you have to kind of start weighing it out. And it's like, they don't want to fix America. That's the thing. They don't want to fix it. And I don't think they care to fix it because they probably deep down inside realize that the United States ain't going to be around forever. Now, I'm not prophesying here. I'm not claiming I know everything. I'm just wildly speculating and having a conversation. That all being said, when you kind of look into things and you realize that the United States was built on a Judeo-Freemasonic ideology, and it essentially was the gateway to world government and economic consolidation, then things kind of start to make a little bit more sense. The United States is the economic merchants center of the world. So, and we see that not only in our reality, but we also see it, mentioned in the book of Revelations. Now, obviously, the book of Revelations never mentions the United States, but it does mention Babylon, and it describes Babylon to a T. And the United States has kind of an uncanny resemblance. Now, it even goes back to even our very symbol. You look at Babylon always had the eagle. The spirit of Babylon traveled from one empire to the next. So, the Persian Empire had the eagle. When the Greeks became powerful, they adopted the eagle. When the Romans became powerful, they adopted the eagle. The eagle's always been the spirit of Babylon. And, well, what's our symbol? Yeah. And then you have the Luciferian goddess statue that was brought in by Freemasonic in New York City. And I even showed on that video that if you Google Babylon on Google Maps, it'll take you straight to New York City. And if I remember right, and I could be wrong on this, but if I remember right, they originally wanted to name that city Babylon. And there's part of it that still is named Babylon. And so there's a particular spirit that has possessed this country as a whole. Now, do I mean that as the entire country? No. I think there's parts of the United States that'll be spared. I think that there's parts of the United States that's good, God-fearing Christian people. And so, but even the Bible tells us to get away from Babylon. It tells us to partake not in it, and, we'll not be part of its plagues and stuff. And so, and I'm just paraphrasing here because I don't have a Bible out here with me. And I don't remember exact quotes very well or verses. But, even God told Abraham to get out of Babylon. And so when you start to think about it, it's like, hey, if you're living in one of these Babylonian spiritually corrupted areas, I start to think about it like this. I'd rather live in a trailer out in the woods in an area that I know is a good area than have $1 million mansion in a satanic shithole that is most likely going to be one disaster of a place to live if things ever got hard. And yeah, Brett Michaels, you mentioned the money thing. Everybody's feeling that. And then the sad thing is a lot of American makers, they're kind of in a spot to where they have to charge, $300-$400 for an American knife because that's what it's damn near costing them to make it. And, that's the thing is the US dollar is collapsing, and they're not telling us that. Like they're trying to uphold the US dollar, and it's also why I think a lot of our politicians, I think a lot of them are intentionally leading us into a chaotic disaster situation because they could also reset the dollar. And when they do, I think they're probably going to do it in some like weird CBDC digital currency type of thing, which is really going to suck for everybody. And it's going to push the reset button. And it's why, like, I don't know and I'm not a financial guru or anything like that, so I'm not giving financial advice, but I'd almost rather have assets and a bunch of money sitting in a bank. Caleb, you mentioned John with Heavyset. He's been radio silence for a while. Yes, he has been. To be totally honest, I haven't even hardly talked to John. I know he's going through a lot of health issues. And I mean, he had to have surgery on his head and brain and everything. And so from my understanding, it's pretty bad, so he can probably use your prayers. I don't 100% know much of the details on it because, well, quite frankly, he hasn't even really told me much. And even what little he has told me hasn't made a whole lot of sense, to be totally honest. So, sadly, sometimes life like that can catch up on you. Like I said, I don't know the full details and everything, so I'm not going to say too much because I don't know too much, but I will say from what little I've heard, it's been a lot of like major catastrophic health issues. So, yeah, that's why John's been kind of MIA for a while, which is sad because, I mean, I think he had a lot of potential and he might still have a lot of potential in the future, but yeah. So, we're talking about Babylon and collapse of the United States and stuff, which I think is happening. We're watching it in real time. And, I've done a couple videos on Trump the Trojan horse, and I still maintain that position. I still maintain that position. I think Trump is basically the salesman for the collapse, just like he was the salesman for COVID and the salesman for lockdowns. people wouldn't have went along with it nowhere near as much if it was, Hillary Clinton or Kamala Harris or whatever other fake character they foisted out there. And Trump's a fake character as well. But he is a salesman. He's the con man. He's the Trojan horse. And so he can sell it a lot better than other people. And so, kind of get my political ideology out there. I don't support any of them. I'm a Christian. I support Jesus Christ. And if anything, if we had to have something here, it'd be something a lot different than what we have. I'll put it that way. But that all being said, we're kind of watching the collapse of the United States. And so, I think it's who of everybody to try to be prepared for that in whatever way they can. Because, you can't fix $40 trillion in debt. You can't fit, like, even if we pulled every single penny out of everybody's bank account just to pay the debt, that much money doesn't even exist. And see, that's something a lot of people don't even realize, how the reserve banking system even works. So, like, let me explain it for a second, okay? Say if we're going to start our own little country and we buy up the island of Guam or something, and we buy it all up and everything, but hey, we need currency, we need money, we need infrastructure. So Elon Musk lends us $1 billion. Okay, we got $1 billion to lend, but he, charges us interest. At the end of the year, though, hey, we taxed everybody, blah, blah, blah. We have $1 billion to pay you back. Oh, no, but you actually owe me, $1.5 billion. Well, that much money doesn't even actually exist. So you know what they do? They print more money and tax us more and raise interest and everything. And so it's just a repeating cycle. And so our entire system is fake and gay and is based on predatory debt slavery, essentially. And so every nation that's ever fallen into that system has always collapsed. I mean, the United States, unfortunately, and I don't say this with like pleasure or anything either. I served this country, but like the Roman legionnaire sitting on Hadrian's Wall, at a certain point you recognize, hey, there's no more Rome behind me. It's kind of that same type of situation. It's like every nation that's ever fallen under this predatory debt system has always collapsed, and we're basically Weimar Republic 2.0. The problem is what I think as people need to prepare for is when it does collapse, what are we going to have next? Because I think that they're trying to engineer a collapse, because what they want to try to institute is a technocratic kind of feudal state that is run by CBDCs. And, a lot of people, me and my wife was actually discussing this. It's like, okay, they want to have all this technology and stuff, but if they collapse everything, isn't that going to kind of destroy the technology? And yes, to a certain extent, but what I think they want to try to do is use the collapse to not only thin some people out, because they don't want that kind of level of technology out to everybody, but also they want to consolidate everybody. And so they want to consolidate everybody to the big cities. It's just like COVID when, they did all the lockdowns and stuff. Did they lock down, Walmart and all the big corporations and everything? No. Actually, a lot of those big corporations went directly alongside with the government and lockdowns and was directly involved in it. So, but they did lock down mom and pop little shop, and most of them went out of business. And so we're seeing the same thing with people, though. They want to try to consolidate everything and ideally thin out, how do I say this, the wild semi-free thinking Americans in particular, or Europeans in particular, and replace them with barbaric people that just wants welfare. How about we put it that way? So that probably might get me some hate, but when it walks like a duck, quacks like a duck, shits like a duck, it's probably a freaking duck, right? So I kind of have a rough around the edges way of thinking about things, but I try to just keep it real. Just lost a couple people. This is a hot kitchen here, guys. I got the itty bitty with me too. Little Enoch. My other boy Gideon wanted to stay inside and play with toys and stuff. So, yeah, and yeah, I agree, Super Saiyan Bear. We need to kind of keep John in our prayers and stuff. Like I said, I'm not totally for sure of the entire situation, so I'm reluctant to speak too much on it, just because I don't want to like assume anything. But just what little I've heard and seen, I think he's having a lot of health issues. But I'm just kind of curious too. What are you guys doing to prepare for hard times? Because what we're seeing is the weak men that created hard times, and we're going to have see the strong men that survives the hard times and rebuild something different. And that's the thing too, is as the collapse manifests, I actually think you're going to see different factions rise up. And in some ways, I think it's a good thing. When you start looking at places like New York, California, and just how like degenerate they've become, really at a certain point, it's like, do we really even want to be the same country as that? And so it kind of sucks in a lot of ways, but sometimes you got to also be realistic too. And, I think what we've witnessed is two different kinds of people with two entirely different ideologies kind of forced into the same country. And it doesn't work. The Tower of Babylon does not work. It's never has worked. It never will work. The whole melting pot, blah, 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 all that stupid stuff. It doesn't work. So there's that. I'll let you guys know what I'm kind of preparing. Obviously I'm been working more on the gun stuff, just getting trained up, getting my physical, getting trained up, and all that good stuff. I did thin out my goat. I got rid of all my goats because they were dairy goats, and so I liked having goat milk, but the juice just was not worth the squeeze. Like they were just a lot more work than what I was getting out of them. So I did get rid of all my goats, but I still got the pastures there. So what I'm going to probably do is coming up soon, I think I'm going to switch to sheep. So I'm going to just get like a few sheep and have some sheep to make some lambs and butcher the lambs. And so I'll just have like a consistent supply of lamb in the freezer instead of goat milk. So that's one thing. We got rabbits going. So, my thoughts is if I really focus on meat sources, most people will gladly give up whatever produce and other foods they have for some meat. I mean, you could solely survive on meat. Go look at almost any tribe out in the world, and most of them are very carnivorous. And I have a high carnivore diet too. So, I feel like rabbits, lamb, chicken, some deer and beef stuffed in the freezer, I could probably do pretty well with that. So that's like one preparedness thing I'm thinking. Brett Michaels asked, do you think World War III could let America live a little longer? Wartime economies seem to bolster certain sectors of business. I live in a big city, so I'm pretty worried no matter what happens. I found more 762 by 39, honestly. Should get more dry goods from Costco or something. Been camping a lot more. I think I have a good system now. Yeah, if you can get out of the big city, I think uh you should definitely try to do that. You know, having a little bit of extra ammo never hurt anybody. I don't really do 762 by 39 as much anymore, just because it's nowhere near as plentiful or cheap, and usually for the price of it, you can get 5.56 for less now, like brass 5.56 for less. And it's why I said a while ago, um, on a 5 guns for SHTF video, is why the like AK platform wasn't really my main thing, was because in hard times importing 762 by 39 might not be exactly the easiest or best. And so if you already have a shit ton of it, then good, grab what more you can. But I kind of do prefer the 5.56 platform overall. And you mentioned the World War III thing. I do think that, so if you've never looked it up, look up Albert Pike's 3 World Wars. I think we're seeing that version of World War III play out and manifest. Now, do I think that they can potentially like ramp up the like Russia, China, blah, 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 and send a bunch of our able-bodied warrior type men to the meat grinder just to thin them out? Yeah, I do think that's possible. Do I think they're going to just nuke everything? Probably not, because then they would destroy their own system of control and everything. So, and we also have to remember, a lot of these leaders of these countries, they all put on the same small hat and they all go to the same wall. Just think about that. So, do I think that they can do a limited World War III or a staged World War III? Maybe, but I do highly recommend looking up the Albert Pike's 3 World Wars. He wrote it back in like 1870s or something like that. And here's the thing, Albert Pike is one of them. He's one of the demonic Freemasonic Illuminist types. And so that's not him prophesying or anything, that's them telling you what their game plan is, essentially. Pistol caliber carbines. So I would never really take one as like my main go-to rifle, especially like out in the woods, out in the fields, out in real world situations and stuff. You'll find that they are very lackluster, especially when rifle rounds are coming back the other way. That being said, I do see certain niche use for them, like for specifically home defense, or I also find that like a lot of women likes to use them just because they don't have like the same blast and recoil and stuff as like a rifle. I also find that for like a travel gun or like a backpack gun or truck gun or something, they could actually be pretty useful, especially if you carry like a Glock 19 or something for your concealed carry, like I do. And then your PCC, if it takes Glock magazines, which it should, then it can interchange magazines with your Glock. So for those niche uses, I think they're pretty decent. I wouldn't